Okay, this is a presentation made by Perri Fedorova, which should be online, but I think she's not there, from Russia, unfortunately. And myself, she's online, okay. So I will credit Lyudmila for a part of this work. We share a passion for abstract writing or abstract pictorial writing or no writing, if you want, if you are strict followers of Glottic definition of writing. And we worked about it to somehow propose an enlarged version of the problems that are writing such as abstract, but also Mayhem pose. This is the Glottic typology that Lyudmila proposed during the last Emblematic Congress. What is important here is that I won't repeat the critique to those arboreal schemes of this morning, for example, by Richard Spode, but also by Terry Joyce. These are some disputable models. The thing I'd like you to note is that if we add to the criteria features to classify writing systems, so writing intended as system as such, not as a textualized project. If we insert the criterion of linearity in path or assemblage units or graphic units, as Lyudmila did, we succeed in inserting some system non-linear emblematic, has called them Lyudmila, which never will find place in a strictly Gothic typology, and some, to better define, some alphabetical non-linear scripts, Pahau, Hmong, and Gu, which have generated a lot of discussion because, as you know, Hangul is featural, or is alphabetical, or is syllabical. It's a problem. Okay, what will interest us in this case is not the system as such, but the way systems is used to create written text. And in this case, we can see that all writing systems have something, different positioning, and also a continuous varying positioning between two continua, one of which is an iconic versus diagrammatic pole, and the other one is a graphic structural continuum, on one end to a maximum linearity in procedural textualization, and the other end is a sort of topologic nonlinear textualization is in the ordering, in the assembling of units. This is a mapping, so it's a continuous model for definition, and you can place in one of the quadrants of the mapping singular example of text of any writing tradition. What we have to show is that nonlinear procedures, nonlinear techniques, emblematic techniques in some way, are pervasive in writing systems because they are basically linked to two dimensions of the writing products. The first one is nonlinearity in the designing or even in compounding of characters or units. I would say with a term used in French at the beginning, syntaxe, the internal syntax of elements of a character, of a unit, of a compound unit. So the syntax is joined to a more large assemblage of units in a syntax, which is traditionally linked to a view of linear glottic sequence of units or script written units, but it is to be intended many times as a non-linear or a topologically encoded use of graphic space in order to express some context, some content, which are linguistically relevant in some cases. So, since we have see that we can say that from our point of view, of course, from a glottical point of view, every writing system is microscopical linearized, but is linearizable. Let's say, if I have to read some way, I have to find a principle of linearization of something that is by, or in any case, three-dimensionally constructed as a text. So here you see something well known to any of us. We know a little bit of the in this script devanagari, and we see that the joining of signs in devanagari follows rules which are not consistent with the strictly glottic segmental rules that writing would have if letters and characters were linearized according to their reading. This is quite easily solved by the specific software of Unicode, for example. The display engine which reorders character in order to show which one are the correct ligatures between characters. And it is quite unnoticed that when you read words in Hindi, you always have to take into account that ligatures are arranged according to graphical and tactile rules, not according to strictly segmental phonological units, which are to be reconstructed by the reader. This is not a problem, but when we come to the Hangul, it begins a problem. Why? Because the features or letters or simplest characters, whenever you want to call them, of Hangul are assembled in a, how to say, not linear way, according to simple rules of assembling forms in an imaginary square of a Chinese character, you will say, which are not predictable and not formally or totally analyzed by software. So this is why in Unicode, if nothing has changed, you will find more than 7,000 codes for writing Hangul. Why? Because the pre-composed syllables are all being encoded, which is quite silly for a Korean writer this, because he knows how to assemble the syllable. But this is why Unicode standard for typographic hangul works. Why this? Because the syntaxis internal nonlinear is not easily solved by a correct programming software. Well, coming to our main points. Well, asset writing is a kind of writing you won't analyze never with Unicode. Why is this is so? Because it's pictorial. I don't think it's this the point. This misses the point that the arrangement in emblematic way, in non-linear way of iconic elements which are morphemic in many instances is not to be solved by a correct linearization which renders this the meaning and the structure of the compound. So in the left you will see this is a place name glyph. The náhuatl reading is Tepetlacalco. So the locative suffix often is not transcribed in Mesoamerican writing systems because it is inferred by the reader by the position of the glyph, which is of course positioned in a specific place of the page when it's a place name. In that case, if you disassemble the glyph and you put it in a line the three elements, which in a way totally not linear, because there is a process of incorporation, there is for example, the petate, the mat is incorporated in the house, and so on. But you will find in that case that te, petla, cal, co, you will find to read in a line that specific place name. But what we for this other example, which is read Xalatlauco, which means in the sandy canyon. The word for canyon is not recoverable if you disassemble the compound and you put mountain, water, sand, mountain. You won't find the real root of the name, which is exactly expressed by the non-linear assembling of the glyphs, by the idea that this is atl, shal, water, sand, between mountains, and so it's atlatli, canyon. So this is for. And you can see here an illustration of how this kind of emblematic textograms, microtextograms of Nahuatl writing work. I'll pass through the explanation which of this. I will will explain that you have addition, as it was a logical, from a visual point of view, image of two or more elements glyph. Juxtaposition in an illogical or free combination of elements, but also incorporation, here, the feet in the tree, the nose in the mountain, which render this kind of writing a sort of entactive problem for an analysis which tries to linearize what is not linearizable. However, these linguistic emblems are complex graphic signs, as Professor Fedorova said, which have an unambiguous reading, because we read them quite easily as place names. Some of them still exist in Mexico. So what's the problem here? The problem is that nonlinearity does indeed exist as Sprout show us in this morning, for example, in heraldic emblems in Europe, in Europe, but these are not writing. Why? They are not writing because these are disparate unions, not linear, linked to a global reading, sometimes even hinted at some linguistic contents. If you see this coat of arms at the right of the slide, it is expressed the name of my Italian family, which is Bracci, and the arm is called in Italian braccio. So it's somewhat phonetically expressed, but in general, there is no such a linguistic elements, because the global reading is in a space structured. I agree, totally agree with Sprout, but not imposing a preferential order, so no syntactically, glottically expressed, and so readable in multiple ways and not directly linked to our linguistic content. Let's see what happens when this is the external space, so that what we call graphic syntax, which is arranged in a nonlinear monad. This is a quite well-known example, is the normal palette on the left. On the right, seal, which is a stone label from the Zero dynasty of Egypt, 3,000 years before Christ. What you can see in all the three examples is the name of the first pharaoh of the unified Egypt, Narmer, the catfish and the chisel, but in a context where the space is organized through a juxtaposition of emblems. We are used to say that this is writing in a circle, in right circle, the other is not writing, but this is maybe a superposition of our point of view on this kind of documents. We are not sure about it. We are not sure how linguistic content is coded in this kind of images. I will pass through example like this, well-known, well-known, and you see here the organization of the space suggests the content and the function of each information. Is there a definite order of reading? I don't think so, but it's quite clear what it means each information transcribed. And the same for the tabular information provided by a linear B tablet like this. So I will just show you very quickly how does this external organization of synthemic space not strictly linearized syntactic space of images function for asset writing, for example. Here's a hot page of an historical report from the Codex Mendoza, And you will see that there is a definite structuring of images, which is also complemented by the orientation sign. It's shown by the arrows. So the reading is column left side, a series of chronological years. Then the name and the function on of the Mexican ruler, then the war, then the people conquered against the actual conquest, each of which has its proper name, place name, and the emblematic formula which express the conquest. When you think that somehow 30 years ago, Todorov, when introducing the Récit tacite de la conquête, so the text written, collected by missionaries from naval-speaking people, said that these chronicles were flows of words following each other and giving each time a slightly different facet of an event, as if it had to be better fixed in memory. He referred this character to a formulaic style of oral narrative. But look at this, and you will be, I think, trained to think that something is present here of formulaic and a repetitive structure in a written history of sex. And the same can be said for, I will pass through tribute accounts. We complicate reference to period of delivery. I won't explain why, but after if you want. But the point here is to show you how similar structure can be found also in medieval, early modern documents in the European tradition of alphabetic rhotic writing, when writing is used to structure, besides image or pictures, a space not linear or multidimensional reading, like this. This is the summary of the content of a work, which is called, as in Latin you see, Summa de Virtutibus and Vices. It's a summary of virtues and vices. And you see that another time, vices are on the left page confronting the Christian cavalier, on the right page, which opposed to them virtues. And the arrangement is totally thought to be to structurally inscribe the name of virtues and vices, and to make correspondence in a structure which is not linear. It's for memory, of course, but it is intrinsically non-linear. And these are other more or less known examples. I will pass through just to note that this is one of the mysticals more known in Italy, Gioacchino da Fiore, and this is the best representation in a diagram of the mystery of Trinity. I haven't, but I want to explain why, how it works. Just note that it works because it's not linearized. And even more recently, many of you will know Temerson and internal vertical justification. This is an English translation of a, not by chance, Chinese poets. And this is quite evident why the non-linear space is extremely important in the reading of such a Apollinaire visual poetry. And also, we find some example of, how to say, change in the entactic dimension. So, and of course, trees. Trees are the basic example we will find in every tradition. And infographics. This is not so recent. This is 46 texts on how to ski, and you will find that the graphic information of the writing and on the pictures is not worth considering with a separation. So I conclude. These are my conclusions. Linearity in any writing system is a semiotic prerequisite in order to assure accurate matching between visual graphic expression of units and sequential, linear, Saussurian terms, bits of speech. That's true. However, while a sequential ordering of reading is to be always assumed, many systems of graphic and coded scripts exploit the at least bidimensional. I would say it is three-dimensional, but I will say why. Visual space, both to form construct written character or units by joining minimal traits in nonlinear paths, the syntaxes, and mostly to articulate written text combining those units in nonlinear layouts. Significantly framing the textual space in view of a correct and complete reading, synsemia. While linear paths in writing, usual writing, emerge with no figurative images and more systematically with a more or less complete glottic phoneticism, the story of writing repeatedly testifies the use of a multilinear structuring patterns, not only in pictorial writings of Central America, but also in products text from medieval culture in Europe. This is clearly explained, and this is why I think that an analysis of objectual text as written object is quite important. By the semiotic nature of any objectual space inscribed, since, and I quote Roy Harris, the text always function as a sign in ways which are not exhaustively described by giving a merely linguistic account of what the text say, or the linguistic written forms used, and of glottic meanings as contrasted with other forms available in a spoken or written language. There's many more to say and to read in those texts, moving from the idea of bidimensional space. Thank you.
Thank you.
I suggest that Ludmila answer question if there are questions on Aztec.
We have only time for one question. No. Questions?
Yeah, there aren't questions.
Just remarks of what you call bidimensional, but in fact three-dimensional is often called 2.5 dimensional. So
2.5, maybe 2.5, because there is the layers,
exactly.
the structural layers in the page. Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So now it's